Right, thanks to everyone who's joined us today. I'm Amy Davis, Content Marketing Manager at Reed. As you know, we're all here to delve into the hot topic in the world of work at the moment, which is hybrid working. And to do this, I'm joined by a panel of business experts. I'm sure they'll agree they're called business experts. First, I'd like to introduce James Reed, CEO and Chairman of Reed. Good afternoon, James. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello,
Hiya.
Amy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me on this. I'm not an expert in this subject. I think few people are, but I'm an explorer. So I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts and hearing what others have experienced.
Great. And Tushar Agarwal, co-founder and CEO of Hubble, London's largest online marketplace for flexible office space. Good afternoon, Tushar. Thank you for joining too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. Very much looking forward to a really great conversation. Certainly something that's happening from boardrooms to bedrooms at the moment. So very much looking forward to taking part.
Fabulous. And finally, last but not least, Jamie Beer, Talent Acquisition Manager at Openreach, who has spent many years working in talent attraction. Good afternoon, Jamie.
Afternoon. Thanks, Amy. Hello, everyone. I do look forward to having a chat about hybrid working. I think, as James said, I don't think any of us are really experts in it.
Well, we may be at the end. We may be able to share some ideas. So before we begin, I just want to quickly run through some housekeeping. This webinar is going to be recorded and you will get a recording of the webinar. So don't worry if you have to drop off or anything. At the end, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session with the panelists. So if you have any questions as you go along, obviously you can't interact on Teams live, so you can put any questions you have in the chat on the top right hand corner of your screen, and if you could just put who your questions to with your question, that would be great, and we'll address those at the end. So to get started, during the pandemic, obviously many of you have experienced a shift from being in a 9 to 5 in an office to remote working from your dining table overnight. And after spending over a year becoming accustomed to working from home, we've seen many employees reluctant to go back into the office and return to a predominantly office-based pattern. With some now expecting a degree of flexibility from the employers including remote working or in many cases hybrid working. Because of this, many employers have introduced a new way of working into their business to both attract and retain talent. And we've actually recently commissioned a survey of 2,000 office workers with OnePoll, who's a research agency, to inform our up and coming white paper, which we'll send to you in a few weeks' time when it's ready. From that research, our results revealed that 3/4 of office workers have actually been given the option to work on a hybrid basis, and but yet 57 didn't have this option before the pandemic, which is obvious, I guess. So to get the conversation started, I just want to kind of know what each of your thoughts on these figures. Tushar, we'll start with you. What do you think about those stats?
Yeah, I think it's not surprising to me at all that that's what's happened. I think fundamentally, as we've all realized over the past 18 months, that there's been this sort of decoupling of work in the workplace. And, we've seen a lot of messages come out, particularly from government, which is everyone needs to get back to work. And the response overwhelmingly has been, well, we have been working. In fact, we've been working extremely hard for the past 18 months. In fact, we've been working so hard that multiple governments dealt with an unprecedented pandemic, and 3 pharma companies managed to produce vaccines in a matter of 10 months rather than 10 years. So people have been working very hard. They just haven't been working from the office. And I think what's happened is that the power dynamic has shifted from the employer to the employee, who is now demanding more flexibility than ever before. And many businesses are responding to that because I'm sure you guys at Reed would be able to attest to this. The war for talent is real. There's a real shortage of talented workers across all sectors, and money and pay and salary is not enough anymore. We recently saw a survey where about 1/3 of workers were willing to give up a pay rise in order to have more flexibility, autonomy and optionality in where they worked. And that's really a huge quality of life thing for most people, where they're not willing to respond to that. When your employer says you have to get back to the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, most employees are now asking the question, why? And if you don't have a good enough answer, then that employee will start looking elsewhere at companies who are a lot more flexible. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I think this is a real paradigm shift, and really one of the biggest changes that we've seen as society. I mean, the office is pretty much full-time office working is pretty much now becoming a relic of the Industrial Revolution. And now the digital age and the fact that we can work with digital tools, it's now becoming obvious that we can work from anywhere, not just the office. So not surprising at all. And I think this is still the beginning of things to come.
Thank you. And Jamie, what are your thoughts on the stat?
Yeah, as Tushar said, I mean, we've seen the working from home can be done and done well. I think a lot of companies, they haven't seen a drop in productivity. You know, I'd be remiss to not mention, though, that the network that enabled us to do it was built and maintained by us at Openreach. But I think the pandemic as well has changed people, the way they interact with work, and also their identities as well. You know, I think before the pandemic, a lot of our, the majority of our week was spent in work, and we have sort of changed the way that we're working with our community, how we adapt with our friends, family, and I think people want to keep an element of that as well, and that personal space, and keep themselves for themselves and not just work. And I think that the balance between hybrid working, really brings that, and I think that people want that in the market.
Yeah, definitely. James, have you got anything to add? What do you think about them?
Yeah. Well, a few thoughts, and thank you both for what you've just said. I would agree. I think there's what I would call a workplace revolution going on. I think it's that big, really. And I think it's the biggest change we've seen in the way we work in 100 years. And the last big change was caused by the First World War. And that was when many women entered the workforce for the first time, and obviously remained in the workforce and became a very important part of the workforce to this day. And this change, I think, is of that magnitude. And I would characterize it, in the past, it was all about going to work. When I started my career, I would go to work, as did everyone else, whether you went to a restaurant or a factory or an office, we all went to work. Now, for many people, not everyone, but for many people, the work is coming home to them. And I think that's a really significant difference. And I think this difference is what we're learning to work with now. And that's why I said I was more of an explorer than an expert, because we're experimenting with how to make this as attractive as possible. Because as a recruiter, we're seeing that our applicants really, really value hybrid or flexible or dynamic working. It's really important to them. And the clients that are able to offer that are the clients who get the best applicants. So this is a big change. I think it's here to stay. I think it was accelerated by the pandemic. I don't mind admitting that I was a sort of work from home skeptic before the pandemic. I'm a total convert now. I think it's incredibly productive. It's been very efficient. I would completely agree with what Tushar said. A lot of people were working very, very hard through this period and very effectively. And it's actually transformed our business. So this is a revolution that's underway, and there are some people who don't like it, and there are some people who are embracing it, but it's not going to go away in my view.
No, definitely not. Well, I hope not, because I really like working from home, and doing a bit of both. So that's great. Jamie, so can you tell us just a little bit about how you've approached the issue of hybrid working at Openreach?
Yeah, so we have something called smart working. So learning from working from the pandemic, what we've missed and what we've gained from it. But really, we've approached it as an informal, flexible policy. Okay, what we're allowing managers to do is decide what is best for their teams and the business, rather than having a catch-them-all policy or formalised policy. And it's supposed to be a dynamic way of working. It doesn't mean people have set days of working from home or in the office. It's about adapting to business and personal needs. And ultimately, it's really about trusting people and also managers in terms of the teams they lead. So for me, the flexibility is the key, and we've tried to stay away from the formalization of hybrid working, because we want to keep the things, the positives of working from home, but also the things that people lost, as in connectivity, little moments in terms of learning about something that you may not have done if you're working from home and you're not in front of people. So we want to keep that part of it as well. So the flexibility for us is really key.
Yeah, fab. Tushar, does this differ at all at Hubble?
I think in general, every company you speak to, there'll be some similarities in terms of concepts, but differences in terms of specifics. So I think for us in general, I would definitely echo what Jamie said around maximum flexibility. Pre-pandemic, we were also office first. So typically we had everyone in the office at least 4 days a week, and 1 day flexibility depending on role. And since then, what's happened is that we've actually got an office which is about a third of the size of what our office was before. And we've given people the optionality to work from a network of on-demand workspaces, whether that's centrally or whether that's locally to where they live, and even some international team members to work from where they are as well. And really, we've left it up to the teams to decide. So, for example, our sales business development teams, they prefer being in person. They kind of see that as a bit of a team sport. So they are typically coming in about 2 to 3 days a week. Our marketing team comes into the office together 1 day a week. And our software developers are a bit more fluid, but generally they come in when they're doing engineering and programming pairing. So that's really about training and development. And what we do is we give in the optionality for people to do that. And then over time, we sort of monitor what's really going on, what people want, and we can sort of adapt and change as those things change as well. And we're certainly starting to see that with a lot of our clients who typically end up being small, medium-sized businesses. Why pay for an office for all of your employees when it's not going to be used to full capacity? Much better to have a smaller office, but give optionality for a wider network of on-demand workspaces as and when people need them. So that's kind of how we've been working. And, you know, it's still in transition. I think this will continue to be a fluid thing for our business and for many businesses as things change, as context changes, where you hire people changes, departments change, and personalities change as well. So it's been really, really fascinating. But yes, I agree with Jamie, flexibility is certainly the name of the game.
Fab, thank you, Tushar. James, what's happening with regards to hybrid working at Reed? I only know obviously one area because I work at Reed Specialist Recruitment, but Reed is a big organisation.
Yeah, well, our overall approach, Amy, would be to pursue what we call a high trust, high performance culture, and you know, to sort of echo what the previous two speakers said, we're very much delegated this to the individual business units and teams to manage as they see fit, because what's most important is to find out what works best, and that will be different in different situations. And so our different companies, you know, the recruitment company is obviously different from the online jobs board company, is that the teams in those businesses work out what works best for them. And so we have some instances where people are coming into the office a lot more than others, but you know, that's all decided locally. And I think what I've observed is it doesn't really matter where someone's working as long as the work gets done. And there's some sorts of work that need collaboration or coming together. I think especially if you're talking about exploring ideas or building energy around a new sales initiative, I think it's really important to get together. But you know, outside my office here, I have 2 beehives, and I watch these bees going about their work. They're busy, as you'd expect. And what's interesting about bees is, you know, a lot of the time they fly off and they're working on their own because they're collecting the pollen, and then they come back to the hive and they work collectively to make the new bees and the honey. So it seems a good analogy, really, for how we might work in a hybrid way. Some of it we do, you know, privately on our own at home or elsewhere, and some of it we do together. And each business and each type of work will have its own best formula for that. And I think that's what we're all exploring now.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go over to Jamie to ask a question of Jamie. So Jamie, with your experience of talent attraction, do you think companies who don't offer such ways of working for those who can will miss out on the best talent? I think James kind of picked on it earlier when we did the intro, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it totally depends on the industry and the role, obviously. But I think companies have to start making an awkward shift to accepting this as a new status quo. You know, I work in more traditional industries. I've worked in manufacturing, you know, telecoms, etc. You know, where working from home wasn't necessarily an option, and you're starting to see that more. And you know, certainly colleagues that I've worked with in the past that even work from home in different industries. So, but what I'm seeing in the market is what I like to call the sort of democratization of work. And what I mean by that is professionals want and are demanding really more of a say in how and when they work. and that they also expect that we measure more on outcomes and productivity rather than what we're very used to as managers is delivery. And I've already mentioned the healthy shift in work-life balance. People expect that, and also from an employer perspective, we should want that for our colleagues as well, for our employees, and also companies really need to recognise that when attracting talent. We also have to consider the positive impact hybrid working brings to diversity, inclusivity, and also social mobility, which is a really important piece of it. Potential talent coming into the business, we have to be able to open up our work for everyone, and hybrid working is a way for us to do that. And also, from a commercial point of view, it allows us to access a much larger talent pool than we ever have before, if you're able to adapt the way that you're working. So, in essence, yes, right, companies will miss out on the best talent. Best talent will expect it, but also, the wider talent pools that it brings as well.
Yeah, I agree. So James, with an increase in the number of jobs advertised on read.co.uk as hybrid roles, what are your thoughts here? You did mention earlier that lots of people are looking for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, we've got over 300,000 jobs now, and that's been a goal for many years, and that's how many are now advertised on Reed on the site. So that underlines the point made earlier about this change in the balance of power between workers and employers, and applicants with skills have a lot more power in the negotiation than they used to have. And in sort of recruiter parlance, it's changed from being a buyer's market where the employer had the power to a seller's market where increasingly the applicants have the power. And one of the things that we're seeing very consistently, I mean, a lot of applicants are looking for more money, but the next thing they're looking for is flexibility. And those are the two big drivers at the moment, because a lot of people have been in situations where there's been pay freezes, or they feel that their real income has not gone up and they're looking for new jobs, and as are people who are looking for more flexibility. So that's a big feature. And we have some clients, I won't name them, but good, well-known companies that are insisting that everyone works in the office or goes to their workplace, 5 days a week, as in the past. And we're seeing good applicants reject those opportunities because they want to work in a hybrid way and flexibly. So those clients are actually losing out potentially on some of the best people. And business in the end is all about people, and attracting and retaining the right people and enabling them to get on with the work. So I would have thought this is something that everyone should be looking at seriously in terms of getting the balance right, because it's certainly what our applicants are seeking at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that, James. So Tushar, as an advocate for hybrid working, for those looking to incorporate it into their workplace, how should they start the process, and how do they even know it's right for them to do?
Yeah, really, really good question, Amy. I'm going to say a word which I think everyone's bored of hearing, but I'll say it anyway. Surveys and listening to your employees. So, there's a lot of surveys done over the past 18 months around people's preferences over work. And yes, like the results and outputs of some of those surveys were to be taken with a pinch of salt, because things were changing so rapidly, and we were having government briefings every week on how the entire country was changing, so sentiment was changing rapidly too. But I think it's really important, whether it's hybrid working or not, to be continuing to listen to your employees and surveying them and asking the right questions around where they want to work, what their current situation is, what work they're getting done, what they're struggling with, and really get a picture across your organization, on an organization level, on a team level, and an individual level. And so once you have that data, then you can start making some decisions, because you'll be able to make some more general decisions around, well, it generally feels like we can adopt more of a hybrid working setup, and perhaps that will manifest itself in this particular way, whether that's a certain number of days working from home, whether that's giving people access to other spaces outside of the home or the office. And you'll also then start to figure out what you can do for individual teams. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. Maybe the sales team needs to work slightly differently to the engineering team. And then you'll start to also surface individual circumstances. So you'll have what we're typically seeing is younger people who live in central part of the city, in house shares. they typically want to come into the office because they just don't have the space to actually work from home properly. Whereas you may have others who are slightly older generation move out to the suburbs, have got their own home office, and they're perfectly comfortable doing that. And you may even have people who are carers, who are parents. And it's really about understanding that and then starting to make those sorts of decisions. I think it's important. And this is certainly what we've seen with, people ops managers, HR directors. There's a lot of pressure on them to make the right call and for that call to be relatively permanent. And I don't think that's the right approach. I think, as we've talked about already, this is still an ongoing experiment. And I think it's OK to look at that data and start running some experiments and some pilots, whether that's a smaller part of your organization, and be pretty open with people on that. Obviously, you need to communicate further the bigger the organization is, but really actually working with your team. And I think the organizations which come under a lot of pressure to make an instant decision sometimes do get it wrong. And you've seen that play out with some of the largest companies on the planet. You saw that happen with Apple when Apple decided to have a particular workplace policy, and there was a revolt amongst their employees. You also saw that with Google and Facebook, where they announced some specific policies and they ended up backpedaling on some of that when employees gave their feedback. So I think it's really, really important for that to be a constant dialogue, and it's all much easier said than done. But really also finally, especially for SMEs, looking at your real estate portfolio. So are you, based on that, are you spending lots and lots of money on office space that'll never be used? Can you actually reduce and reallocate that spend across where people actually spend time? And that's really what we specialize in, what we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Fab, thanks Tushar. Jamie, sorry. Jamie, any other good tips that you've got there?
No, Tushar,
it's really hard, sorry, having James and Jamie, it's confusing me, sorry.
No, as Tushar said, it is, it's about not having those blanket policies. And it needs to adapt to the teams, and exactly what you said. What you're treating to the field engineering teams is not exactly going to fit, for your finance or legal departments, and we need to recognise that. We also have to recognise as well that different professions demand different things, and our attraction policies need to our attraction methods need to also reflect that when we talk about hybrid working, and so on.
Fabulous, Jamie. Nearly called you James again then. James, anything you've got to add?
Well, just some things to be sort of cautious about, I suppose, that we've found, onboarding new people and sort of bringing people into a culture and what the expectations are. I think it is quite difficult if it's done largely remotely. So I think there are certain aspects of work that need to be prioritized that are very important around people, where we need to have a plan for how we're going to get people to join the team and participate fully and feel part of the team and meet everyone and enjoy their new job. And I think that does involve getting together quite a bit and creating sort of activities and purposeful comings together. So I would throw that in. And interestingly, we had a superb colleague who resigned at the beginning of this year because she wanted to work from home 100%. And we weren't able to fulfill that because the job she was doing with us did require coming to the office 1 or 2 days a week. And she went off, and interestingly, she's coming back. And she said that it didn't really work for her working from home 100%. And I think that's another extreme, alongside getting people to come in 5 days a week, the sort of working remotely 100% might not be that great either. So that's why we're sort of drawn towards this hybrid approach in the middle. And I just share that because I thought it was interesting. And I think people can feel quite isolated if they're out of the system that much. That's obviously an extreme, but somewhere is the right combination of working remotely and working together. And that's what we're all looking for. And I think it varies, but it seems to be somewhere around 2 or 3 days a week together.
Yeah, I think that sounds like it works. I think if it's too much working at home, like you said, you feel a little bit alienated, especially it depends on your family and whether you're living on your own. There's so many things that affect it. So James, kind of going back to our research, we found that of those people that weren't working on a hybrid basis at the moment. When asked if they would like to work hybridly in the future, almost half of them said that they would. And when asked why, 68% of people said hybrid working better suited their lifestyle, 48% said they just prefer it, and 44% said that they were more productive. So talking about kind of being more productive when working this way, do you think this is the case for everyone? How would you suggest leaders outline expectations, responsibilities, and overall ensure their teams remain productive while they're working hybridly?
Well, interestingly, in our business, it has been more productive. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the case for everyone, but overall, we have achieved higher levels of productivity, which surprised me, working remotely than we did working in offices 5 days a week. And that remains the case now. And I think there are lots of possible reasons for that. But from our point of view, productivity has gone up. And significantly, costs have gone down. So from an entrepreneur's point of view, this is a good thing. And certainly in our business, it's very attractive. So what's interesting to me is I don't meet a lot of business owners that want to spend more money on rent. And I don't meet a lot of people who want to spend more time and money on commuting. So there's definitely a deal to be done. Works for everyone. And I think that's what's sort of emerging. But what's significant is not every job can be done in this way, obviously. And those percentages you gave of people who are expressing preference to work in a hybrid fashion, many of those people might be doing jobs that require them to be in a certain location, whether they're working in retail or whether they're working in distribution or whether they're working in hospitality or the health service. And I think that's quite challenging because it means that there's a pull from certain parts of the economy attracting people because it has this to offer that needs to be countered by those other parts of the economy that don't have it to offer in the same way. And what's interesting, what we're seeing is those other parts of the economy are increasingly improving their pay and their working conditions for people so that they can compete. And I think that's positive, because a lot of people who were doing these key worker roles in the past have been underappreciated and underpaid and undervalued. And I think this correction is a wholly good thing. So I'm hoping that those people in lower paid jobs that involve face-to-face working will have a better deal as a result of this, because their employers will have to compete more keenly to attract them in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. So, Jamie, going back to setting up a hybrid working model, kind of using your experience of what you've done, what should a hybrid working policy consist of?
Yeah, so I mean, you need to go back to the ways of working and also the processes within that team, as well as just thinking about people who work from home. What can actually be done in the office? Why do you need to be in the office for certain tasks? Make the office the most productive space that you can be. You can connect with people, you can meet people, you can do things that you can't necessarily do and work from home. And that needs to be at the forefront of every manager's mind, not necessarily within the hybrid policy. And then really working back, what are you trying to achieve in terms of working from home from an individual basis? What do you actually need? So there's some considerations from an individual in terms of what they want out of it. But to policy-wise, I mean, I've already talked about it. It just needs to be flexible and as far from as rigid as possible. It's not a diktat from central HR. It needs to be owned by individual teams, and it needs to be owned by individuals of that team as well.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Jamie. So this is a question for all of you. How would you recommend businesses support their employees when working on a hybrid basis? I know you said it's down to the individual managers a lot of the time. Is there anything you can share from your own experiences? So anything you guys are doing, James at Reed, to support us?
Well, I think wherever possible, support people in terms of giving them the tools to do the job. Obviously, and that would be software and hardware, really. And we've invested a lot over the last year and a half in improving up what I like to call it rather pompously our digital real estate, so that people have really the best tools to work on, and so it doesn't really matter where you are. And so my setup, with the screens and the little Surface Go I use, is exactly the same in my home study as it is in my office. I just plug in whichever place I am, and it makes no difference. And so we're seeking to sort of enable people to be set up in that way. I mean, obviously they need good access to Wi-Fi, etc. The other thing that we seek to do is make clear what the expectations are. So although we say, you know, you can work flexibly, there are core hours in the day when we would expect you to be at your post, so to speak. So between 10 and 3, we expect people to be there. But then they might want to work later if they need to go and run an errand or pick up a child from school. You know, that's all fine. Because in the end, our business is very transparent, because in recruitment, ultimately we're all paid on our results. You know, if you make a placement, you've made a placement. If you haven't, you haven't. And so it sort of supports this type of work, really, because it means you can get on with it where you are. And I think people have really embraced that, and they really like it, and it's made us collectively more productive.
Brilliant. Tushar, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think James really hit the nail on the head there, in terms of you want to make sure everyone has the tools to get the job done, because really that's what this is all about. The tools to get the job done used to be in the office, when you used to have to come and access a physical piece of equipment that was only there. And when that became mobile, and the location became agnostic, you could be able to do that from anywhere. But really, you want to make sure that the setup is correct. I think the other thing that we are seeing is businesses wanting to export some of the office culture home. So, you know, lots of businesses have you know, offices with lots and lots of different amenities and lots of employee perks on site. So, you know, a professional barista coffee that you get for free, or a spin class, or whatever, or a massage, or whatever's going on. And we're starting to see employers trying to replicate or export some of that office culture home in different ways, to make sure that those who are working from home more frequently, for whatever reason, aren't missing out on that, and they still feel that they're part of the team, and they're part of the culture. So, you know, how do you replicate that? How do you replicate the office birthday, when everyone comes together and you know, blows candles on a cake? Can you sort of press a button and everyone gets a Krispy Kreme donut on the day someone's birthday, right? So those sorts of things are is lots of companies are exploring that, and are making that happen, because they value their employees wherever they're working, and you shouldn't have to come into the office to enjoy that. So I think those are some interesting places that things are going. And I think the other thing which we're seeing hugely is there's sort of confusion between remote work and home work. The definition of working remotely is not working from the company office, but that doesn't necessarily have to be working from home. And we're seeing lots of people who are opting to work from sort of third spaces on demand. So that could be co-working spaces near your home. That could be meeting clients somewhere centrally or near your client's office. That could be working from abroad, or even giving your team who work, you know, outside in the countryside access to spaces too. So I think that's really quite important, because getting to the office frequently may be something that's preferred by someone, but it's not possible for whatever reason, or it's not preferable for whatever reason. But being able to get out of the house and going into an environment where you can do good solo work, or meet other people, or you know, really just plug into the right sort of technical infrastructure, whether that's like fast Wi-Fi or really great desks and chairs, that's really, really important for people as well. And we've seen just in the last 6 months a 15x growth in demand for sort of people working in third spaces, and I don't think that's slowing down anytime soon.
Good for you anyway. Can I just ask you, Jamie, what your thoughts are on that?
I think we also need to think about onboarding and new starters. James mentioned it previously. We need to go back to our learner development policies as well, and the processes that we bring new employees in, and to ensure that it's also fit for purpose to work from home or wherever we work. There's also an element as well, I think, that the business can do to support employees is around, you know, the physical aspect. You know, James mentioned it in terms of the technology we use, you know, making sure that we're matching like when we come into the offices. But, you know, ultimately it's down to better management of people as well, and giving managers a better idea in terms of managing productivity and outcomes, as I said, rather than what everybody's used to in terms of managed deliveries, and actually empowering the individual to manage their own delivery, whilst the manager can focus on other things. And that will also sort of make work from home a lot better.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. So many debates around hybrid working surround kind of the lack of inclusivity, I can't even say it, for workers in industries where this model may not be possible. For example, retail, hospitality, health and care. James, I know you touched on it earlier. In scenarios where you have a mixture of workers in different environments, to what extent do those who can't work hybridly need to be compensated by some other form? Tushar, what are your thoughts on that?
I think my thoughts are incredibly similar to what James said about 5 minutes ago, which is, the concept of hybrid work is really there for professions or roles or teams that, it works for them, and that will differ by team and what you do. It's really almost impossible to be a plumber working remotely. You need to go and plumb physically. It's really difficult to be on the shop. It's difficult to be a retail worker without being on the shop floor. And I think people are pretty aware of that. I also think that there is a perception that working flexibly and working hybrid, particularly for office workers, is a perk. Like it's a bit of a luxury that other people can't afford. But really, again, it's not like people are slacking off. Like we've proven in the last 18 months that when people are working in a hybrid fashion, they're working just as hard, if not harder. But different roles just require you to work in different places, and that happens whether you're an office worker, whether you're a retail worker, or whether you're a plumber or a builder. And I think generally companies will have to have those open dialogues with their employees and their teams to help figure that out.
Fab, thank you. James, anything you want to add? I know you spoke about it earlier, but
yeah, I was just thinking about my two youngest children when Tushar was talking, and they're both, well, one's 18 and one's 22, and neither of them at university, both went to work, and one's working in a restaurant and one's doing accounting, and the one doing accounting is working remotely a lot, and the one in the restaurant's obviously going there sometimes 2 shifts a day. And I was just thinking about who was having the most fun, and I think the one in the restaurant is probably having the most fun because she's meeting a lot of others, she's making friends and meeting people, and it isn't in the same as isolated as the one that's doing the accounting. So, I mean, we shouldn't forget that there are lots of positives in terms of going to work, as well as having work come to us. I think, though, on a more serious note, there is a danger that we end up with a sort of 2-speed workforce of very highly paid people working in a hybrid fashion, who have a great work-life balance and have it all in a way, and then a sort of lower paid key worker, frontline workforce that doesn't have the same positive upsides. And I think as a society we must make sure that does not happen, and that we value what used to be called blue-collar work as highly as white-collar work, and that we value those people equally, because I think this change is absolutely significant and will be enduring, and we as a society need to adjust and improve our approach to how we evaluate work overall.
Brilliant, thank you. So moving to a hybrid working model can have obviously financial repercussions for a business. Less people in the workplace could imply lower office expenses, but an increase in the need for better technology. And I think, James, again, you covered this a bit earlier. From your experience, what have the economic consequences been of implementing and maintaining a hybrid working plan? Tushar, do you want to go with that one first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's been different for every business, really. There's some businesses who have long-term office leases. So, they're in leases for 5, 10, 15 years, and they're not going to be able to reduce that cost significantly, although they're happy to embrace hybrid working as a way of making sure that they retain workers and as a, changing their own sort of like work operating system with a view to perhaps reduce that real estate over time. So there are some companies who are actually, keeping the same amount of real estate. There's other companies like, for example, TransferWise and Shopify and even Lloyd's actually, who have actually invested a lot of money into actually fully refurbing their offices to make them more amenable to sort of work that people want to do when they come in. So TransferWise, for example, took their entire London headquarters and they actually reconfigured it with an emphasis on collaboration spaces, meeting spaces, auditoriums, entertaining, and sort of like social spaces where staff can get to know each other, and actually reduce the amount of sort of just desk office space. So some companies are sort of reconfiguring that and actually spending more money than they would before to make sure that when people do come in, they're having a really, really great experience, but still allowing that remote work and flexibility. And then you have companies who are in sort of more flexible leases. And what we're starting to see is, again, every company is different, but depending on how much their office is going to get utilized, like us, actually reducing the size of the actual headquarters, but actually redeploying the original budget into giving people access to on-demand workspace, or even investing more and more into the remote work experience. I think on a typical basis, our SME customers, when they decide to sort of reduce and reallocate that budget, we're starting to see cost savings around 20 to 30% overall. But really, they still continue to invest in really great remote work experiences, on-demand spaces, and still have a really high quality headquarters, even if it was smaller than before. So I think it really, really does depend, and we'll see this play out over time. But you do also have some bad players, and I'm not going to name any names. Some of these companies have been in the media already, who are just using this as a pure cost-saving exercise and saying we're shutting down all of our offices, we're all going to work remotely, but we're actually not going to redeploy any of that initial budget or spend to making that a great experience for our staff. You kind of just have to take the burden on yourself. So we are starting to see that as well, and those employers are having staff members leave because they know that they're getting a bad deal.
Thank you, Tushar. Jamie, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, James and Tushar be more qualified than me to answer on the business costs of hybrid working. But I mean, we were quite lucky. We started our transition to smart working before the pandemic, really. So we were modernising our workplaces, and as Tushar said, doing exactly that. Creating more collaboration space, creating more areas where we can actually sit down and collaborate and work on different projects and problems that we may have not done previously, where we just sat at a row of desks and just plowing through your work, which is, it's not the best use of time all the time. But for me, one of the sort of benefits from this is happier employees. Okay, and then what does that do? One way to solve your recruitment problem is to solve your retention problem. So we are not spending money on employer branding, we're not spending money using agencies, we're not spending money trying to attract people. So for me, there's costs in terms of that, but also then from a productivity point of view, we've got people who are happier doing more work. We've also got people who the longer they're with us, their knowledge increases within the role, and so on. So that's a real key for me from a recruitment point of view.
Fabulous, thank you, James. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, the financial repercussions of hybrid working for us, in a word, have been positive because, as I mentioned earlier, productivity has improved. Satisfaction has also improved. People are happier at work than they were, and we've been tracking that for many years. And so that's positive, and costs have gone down. So it's been pretty transformational, actually. It's been very good for business. And so I think, that's a big reason why a lot of companies will continue to work in this way or want to work in this way, because in a word, it works.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, we're getting close to the 15-minute mark, but I do want to quickly ask this final question. But if you could all just kind of wrap it up and be quite quick, that'd be brilliant. So it would be great to get all your ideas on the year ahead. What do you think the future of hybrid work will look like? What its impact will have on the candidate market? Jamie, do you want to start? Just give a little bit of a summary, what you see happening.
Yeah, the short
predict
answer,
the future.
That's it. Yeah. So the short answer is more power is going to go to candidates. It's as simple as that. They're going to demand more, they're going to want more, and they're going to expect more out of companies. And for those who aren't going to adapt, then we'll see some struggles there. The other thing for me is that we will see more and more people demanding that we pay them by productivity rather than necessarily just showing up to work. And I think outcomes-based pay and things like that, very similar to a sort of contracting market, may come in the future as well from a recruitment perspective.
Brilliant, thank you, James.
Well, I think we'll see continued skill shortages, labour shortages, and I think that's going to be a persistent theme because the size of the workforce has contracted, and I totally agree with Jamie's point about there being more worker power, and that will mean that businesses like all of ours will have to work harder to attract people and to retain them. But that's good news for working people.
Brilliant. Tushar, what would you say?
I think every business is going to adopt a different flavour of working, whether that's office first or remote first or hybrid. And really, when employees have been given that power, it's about, choosing your flavour. Do you prefer a company that is fully remote? Do you prefer a company that wants you to come in 2-3 days a week? Or do you prefer a company where the office atmosphere is 5 days a week? And you'll have that choice even within sectors. So in tech, you've seen people like Netflix become full-time office and Spotify become full-time remote. And even in finance, you've seen people like Goldman Sachs go full-time office and Citigroup and Lloyd's go hybrid and remote. And people are choosing between those employees in the same sectors, and their workplace strategy is now their recruitment strategy.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous, thank you. Right, we have had lots and lots of questions come through, so let's get started on those. First one is from Jack, which can go to Tushar. How can we go about changing our boss's opinion from against hybrid working to embracing and accommodating it without bribery?
I think we get this question a lot, and I think it's a really Hi there, sorry guys.
It's all right, you're all right.
Yeah, sorry. It's a really tough one because a lot of it depends on the culture within the organization and whether you have leaders like James who are open to dialogue and are open to two-way conversation. We're hearing from a lot of employees at companies who want this to happen but are struggling to prove it. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Jamie's talked a lot today about outcome-based performance, really great management. Can you prove to your manager or your boss that you can deliver really great work and really great performance and really great outcomes by working in a hybrid way or a remote fashion? And is there a way to sort of like experiment or pilot that so both of you can get comfortable around it? I think those are the sort of conversations that we're seeing, but really it is tough because there's lots and lots of very strong opinions over office and remote and hybrid at the moment. And what you don't want to do is go and threaten, which we've also seen people threaten to sort of leave if people don't accommodate that. And some people can do that and get away with it, but really it's about having that open dialogue and so sort of proving that performance is not going to be affected by more flexible working.
Perfect, thank you very much. So
Can I say something here?
Oh yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
I think it's a really good question, and I think I was thinking about this as the question was asked. It's sort of commercial Darwinism in action at the moment, and people misquote Darwin saying it was all about survival of the fittest. It wasn't at all. I mean, what Darwin was talking about was survival of the most adaptable. And this is a process that is underway globally that we have to adapt to. And we're all finding the sort of new ways of working and exploring how to go about it. But I think if you combine that thought with this has been very good for many businesses who are now doing better as a result of embracing these ideas, you might have a compelling message.
Thank you, James. Oh, you've got another question now, James, anyway. So an anonymous question for you. Do you see a shift of new millennials moving jobs more due to the work from home attractiveness?
Well, we've seen a shift of huge proportions right across the labour market. Interestingly, the sort of younger workforce, many of them chose to continue to study rather than look for new jobs because last year the picture was so bleak. It's changed totally now, and there are so many opportunities for people that I would say if you're unhappy where you are, go and have a look around, because whether you want to work flexibly, whether you want to change your company or boss, or whether you want to earn more money, I don't think it's ever been better, certainly in my career, than now, to have a look, and the opportunities are many and varied. So it's really exciting time for someone starting out in their career, I would suggest, because you have the opportunity to learn and do so many interesting things. My 18-year-old daughter, I mentioned, she's got 2 jobs at the moment, and she's learning so much, and I think that's very exciting for her. So I think millennials have the opportunity to really embrace this, and I hope they will.
Fabulous, thank you. So this is one for all of you. Do the speakers think widespread adoption of hybrid work and increasing emphasis on work-life balance will inevitably lead us towards a 4-day working week? Jamie, do you want to go first?
Personally, yes, it will do, but I believe it would do without hybrid working. Okay, I think we're leading that. We're starting to transition into that, and it comes back down to that productivity, right? Rather than management and delivery of it. And I keep banging on about that, but we are seeing certain studies in terms of universal basic income, and 4-day working week will be part of that, I'm sure. So yes, in essence, but again, that's my personal view.
Tushar, what do you think?
I think the 5-day working week is a relic of the Industrial Revolution and even the Agricultural Revolution. I think the 4-day working week, I think, is almost a change to status quo, which I think is already being disrupted. The 5-day working week assumes that we're all working synchronously, and James talked earlier about core hours of 10 to 3 p.m. And I think actually where the world is heading, especially with remote work and hybrid work, is more asynchronous work. So it doesn't matter when the work gets done, as long as it gets done. And people choose to do most of that work that can be done asynchronously when they have the time. So it could be that some people prefer to work Tuesday to Sunday and take Monday off. And it could be that some people get all their work done in 4 days because they work really, really hard, and then they take a 3-day weekend. I think that's kind of where we're heading, where as long as work gets done, it doesn't really matter whether it's done in a 5-day work week or a 4-day work week, as long as it gets done. So I think we might see something a bit more fundamental than that.
Fabulous, thank you. James, what would you say?
I'm not so sure, because what I'm seeing is a contraction of the workforce. So there are fewer people available to get the work done, and that's because the demographics, not just in the UK but around the world, because the people have been having smaller families. So the people of working age, as a proportion of the population, are becoming less numerous. So who's going to do all the work? Well, they are, in one way or another, I suspect. So does that mean they're going to have more time off? I'm not so sure, but it will be much more fluid than 5 days a week, 9 to 5, as Tushar was saying. And some people might work 6, 7 days a week, and they might want to and choose to, and others won't do so. I mean, we've seen a lot of people leave the workforce over the last year because of the pandemic, especially older workers from that baby boom generation. That's a really big group, and that's a big reason for the shortages and changes that we're seeing now. So it's very hard to tell what's going to happen in the future, but if this trend in sort of lower birth rates continues, the world population will shrink and also age. So what does that mean for workers? That's a big question.
Thank you, guys. Right, I'll put this one to Jamie. Hybrid working allows people to be more flexible around their personal life, but do you feel it's harming individuals' skills and communication skills?
No, I don't. I think you have to be more succinct when you're working from home, or you're actually you're in a hybrid working model. You have to be dynamic in the way that you approach certain problems, certain tasks. You can't. It's not one size fits all. It's no. I think it actually improves people's behaviours and the skills, because we have to focus on being as efficient as possible, and that's the whole point behind it.
What about the younger generation, say people that have not worked before, if they've got a first job, that kind of thing? Do you think that's the same for them?
No, not necessarily. So that is different, and it comes back down again, like I said earlier, it's on the L&D policies and your good onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
And not seeing onboarding as just a facet of just bringing people in, telling them about the company. It's really trying to give them the tools to be able to operate in that organisation, and it's seen as more as a personal development activity rather than just welcome to so and so. So that element needs to be brought in. One thing that I started during the pandemic, so I didn't meet any of my colleagues for about 6 to 7 months. But one thing that we did here is that you are assigned people that aren't necessarily within your team, or you're not managing, or are managing you, to be able to be your buddies essentially within the company. And that's all you're doing when you're in the office as well. Okay. And the great thing about hybrid working, and not what we've done, which is 100% work from home, which I don't think anybody wants, I certainly don't, is that you're still going to get that element of it anyway. And what you need to do, particularly with newer people, is ensure that the work is more structured, certainly initially.
Fab, thank you. James, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking, certainly in my early career, I learned so much from just picking up some bits of information, snatches of conversation just from the people around me. And I think that is important when you start out in your career, that you sort of are able to soak up knowledge and know-how, and how we do that in this new environment needs more thought and attention, I would suggest. So, obviously getting people together works, but are there other ways of doing that in a remote fashion? Fabulous,
thanks, James. Tushar, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think I actually would agree with Jamie that what we've seen is, particularly within our company, is people having to sharpen their communication skills. I like to call it think before you speak rather than think whilst you speak. So especially in the world of asynchronous communication, where people are writing to each other, with one of the disciplines that we've created is, rather than having big company updates or department updates, people are writing updates to each other, and writing stuff down forces you to think about what you want to say and then say it in a concise way that communicates to the other person better. So I think what it stopped is lots of people doing the classic, can I grab you for 15 minutes around the corner, or whatever, and they're sort of like almost giving a stream of consciousness to the other person. So they're thinking whilst they're speaking. And if you can think before you speak, your communication is nearly always a lot better. So I think we're seeing that certainly happen, but absolutely agree around new starters and people entering the workforce. It's very difficult to figure out when you first start what you should be doing, what's right, what's wrong, what's the right style. And normally you learn from absorbing and shadowing people around you. And I think that still really, really needs to happen.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, I think we've got time. We've got like 1 minute left just for last question. This is from Bruce to all of you. Many employers are offering flexible benefits where employees can choose the benefits that suit them as an individual, such as pension top-up, childcare vouchers, extra holiday. Does the panel feel that flexible working should fit onto that list, or is flexible working a right rather than a benefit? Let's go with James.
I think that there is a legal right to request flexible working, and in that sense, it is a right. But different businesses will be able to offer different opportunities, from very flexible to probably fairly restricted. So I would say it should be on both lists, really. It should be on that menu, but also there as a right.
Fabulous. Jamie?
Yeah, as James said, it's a legal right to request flexible working, but flexible work and hybrid are two different things. Flexible is around time, hybrid is about place, essentially, isn't it? So hybrid working, it's not going to be for every single company, and it can't be for every single company. It should be done for those who can do it and have the resources to do it. But I would see it as more of a positive for that company, and certainly from a recruitment point of view. And we're all candidates at one point in our lives. We're going to say, that company would probably be more attractive to me. So yes, it's more of a benefit than a right in terms of hybrid working.
Tushar, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got really nothing more to add than what James and Jamie have already said. I think very, very wise insights and words. I think one sentiment that, as we're approaching the end of it, I'd just like to talk about is that everyone is there seems to be an approach to hybrid and flexible working especially from the perspective of an employer, that it's something that we're like having to do, and it feels hard, and it feels like it's a burden, and it feels like a give to an employee. And I'd just like to sort of reframe that. I mean, I think we've just entered an era where this one size fits all of everyone's going to come to the office Monday to Friday is over, and we're now able to redefine and recreate the future of where we work in our own organizations, companies, teams, and individuals, and actually like leaning into that to really dig into actually like what will really work for our company is something we should actually be really, really excited about, versus bemoan this sort of change, which has been quite difficult. I think we should, if we lean into it, it could actually create a much better working world for both employers and employees.
Fabulous. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for today. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question. We didn't get through all of them, but did the majority. Thank you to all of you, Jamie, James, and Tushar, for taking part. I found the conversation really interesting, and I think taking away from that, there's kind of no right or wrong answer. It's kind of, I guess the key is being really flexible. So thank you very much to all of you for joining. We'll be in touch with a follow-up email to all of you that have attended. Thank you very much for attending. In the next couple of days with the recording of the webinar. We'll also send you a copy of our up and coming white paper when that's ready, and we're also going to be uploading a template of a kind of flexible working policy based on the READ one to our website, so if you wanted to download it, you'd be more than welcome to access that. Do keep an eye on our social media channels for news on the latest events and on read.com. Or ask your consultant, your recruitment consultant, for the list of up and coming ones. So thank you everybody, and I hope everybody listening has a great afternoon. Thank you.